Hello there, welcome to the Saroy channel wherever you are in the world, and so much love to each and every one of you. I do hope you're keeping warm and that you're going to get yourself a lovely hot drink, because we always need that uplift on a cold winter's day. And if you're living in a warm part of the world, go and get something refreshing, because we're on part 2 of our story tonight, and we're learning about a woman who shoplifts because it gives her an absolute thrill. But I've got a feeling that things are going to go a little pear-shaped. So let's continue with part 2 of our story. But before we do, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell and a thumbs up. And let's continue with part 2 of our story tonight. It was on a somewhat modest, very unassuming Monday morning that Sheila Morris's wily attempts at stealing would be put to the test again, as sometimes, even if you are a proficient, rather slick thief, you can come unstuck, especially if your foxy plans become unhinged. Sheila Morris had entered the department store. It wasn't very busy on that Monday morning, not like it usually was. She looked around prudently from the left to the right, and took into account the location of all the security cameras, as that was something she always did as a matter of routine. Sheila had no idea what she was going to steal today, which made this adventurous opportunity that stretched out before her like an uncharted treasure map to be explored all the more exciting. She walked towards the elevators with her normal elegant grace and poise, and steadily made her way up 2 floors, and then she found herself on the 3rd floor that was devoted to women's sleepwear and lingerie, and in the far corner was the bedding section, where pillows, duvet covers, sheets and pillowcases were sold. But on this day Sheila had no interest in them. She wouldn't get very far stuffing a duvet cover into a slim purse and getting away with it. She did have her limitations, no matter how qualified she had become at pilferaging. Sheila sashayed boldly towards the sleepwear section, like a woman with a driven purpose. The adrenaline surged through her system as she sensed it wouldn't be very long before she lifted something off the shelves and guilefully slipped it into the hungry open gullet of her purse that was longing for a feed. Her heart jiggled around in her chest very nervously, like it always did when she sensed the moment of her sneaky deed was very close to being fulfilled. Sheila found herself physically drawn, like iron filings to a magnet, towards the gorgeous section of designer silken nightdresses on display that didn't come cheap, were marked with the label Sally Markham, who Sheila knew was an up-and-coming designer, making quite a name for herself in the fashion world. A young woman who was clearly in charge of overseeing the lingerie department section came trotting over to Sheila with a warm smile on her pretty fresh face, with a nose covered in a splattering of pale freckles. She was a young woman, possibly in her early 20s, with dark brown hair that in certain lights showed off a gorgeous auburn hue, which was a colour Sheila had seen in horses before. The young lady was dressed in a stylish pair of black pants and a matching well-fitting jacket that was nipped tightly in at the waist. This was accentuated by a crisp white cotton shirt, where she wore a gold name badge on her collar, which read the words Jenna Fletcher. "Hello, ma'am. Can I help you?" she asked politely, with a bright, friendly smile that Sheila realised was genuinely sincere, unlike some shop assistants she had come across over the years, who smiled on command and wore that smile like a scarf around their neck that was far from genuine. "No, I'm fine," said Sheila. "I'm just looking at these lovely nightdresses. They're terribly pretty, are they not? I really love the lace fringes around the edges, and the silkiness of the material. It's so soft to the touch." "Well, they are very lovely," said the sales assistant. "You've got very good taste, if you don't mind my saying so, ma'am. If I could afford a nightdress like that, I'd wear it every single night and go to bed feeling like the Queen of Sheba herself. Sally Markham is an up-and-coming designer who specialises in sleepwear, I'm told." "Yes, I've heard about her before." "If you don't mind my saying, ma'am," said the sales assistant with a demure smile on her face, "but I think the red nightdress would look particularly good on you. It would complement your golden skin and brown eyes. You would definitely be a size small," she said, pulling out a red nightdress from the hanger that was surrounded with black lace and looked extremely sensual and provocative. Something that Sheila's straight-laced husband Vince would likely find a little titillating for his heart to handle, which was why Sheila more than often wore men's pyjamas to bed. "Would you like to try it on, ma'am?" asked the saleslady, her face brightening. "Let me tell you, if you wear that for your husband, he's going to be a very happy man indeed." She giggled, her eyes lighting up with such enthusiasm. "Many men have a thing about red in my experience." Sheila Morris shook her head. "No, I'm fine for the moment, thank you very much. But I will let you know if I need anything." "Well, I'm right over there, at the corner," said the lady, pointing to the sales counter where there was a cash register on display. "Call me, ma'am, if you need anything at all. You need only ask. As you can see by my name badge, my name is Jenna Fletcher." "Thank you, Jenna," said Sheila, giving the sales assistant an appreciative nod. She watched her scurry away to her position behind the counter, where she busied herself with a large pile of pink vests, which she was separating into different sizes. Occasionally she looked up in Sheila's direction, flashing her a bright, sunny smile, as Sheila continued to feign interest in the nightdresses on display. The nightdresses certainly had a hefty price tag on them, but Sheila didn't care for any of them, and she chuckled as she thought about how Vince would react if he was to see her wearing something as skimpy as this. He'd probably close his eyes and tell her to put on something decent. He always told her she looked irresistibly sexy in men's pyjamas, for it emphasized her femininity far more than any silk or lace ever would, and she believed him on this one. To all intents and purposes, the urge to steal one of the nightdresses on display and stuff it in her purse became all too overwhelming. Sheila skimmed through the large rack of nightdresses, pretending to look at each individual one, and admire all the different colours, of which there were a multitude, from French blue to emerald greens and chocolates. Occasionally the young woman would look up at her and smile again. Sheila could feel the adrenaline building up in her bloodstream, pumping furiously through her system. So much so, in fact, that her entire body began to pulsate and tingle. Then the urge to take one of the nightdresses became absolutely insatiable. Sheila quickly stuffed a red silken nightdress into her purse. She nervously looked around herself to see if anyone had spotted her doing this, but nobody appeared to be around, and she inwardly drew in a deep breath. Sheila proceeded to make her way through the lingerie section towards the elevator, as casually as she could, as picking up speed would only emphasize the fact that she had something to hide and draw attention to herself, and she was eager to get out of the shop as quickly as she could. The truth was, at this point, when she was about to leave the lingerie section, her heart was a-flutter, almost as if thousands of butterflies had taken up residence in her chest. Sheila briefly glanced at the shop assistant Jenna and nodded at her, and she was about to reach the escalator when all of a sudden a security guard came charging towards her, with a grim "I gotcha" expression written on his face. "Oh no, please God, no," thought Sheila, her heart screaming in horror, for in this precise moment she realized she'd been caught red-handed. But to her surprise, the young assistant, who called herself Jenna Fletcher, came rushing to her aid, and this she had not expected at all. "Sid, please stop, Sid," said Jenna, rushing up to him, making an apologetic face. Don't arrest this customer, Sid. No, she hasn't taken anything illegally. If you must know, she's a regular of mine. Comes here all the time. A very special customer she is. I know her extremely well. She's buying a red nightdress from me. I told her to keep it in her purse for the time being, because she wants to shop around the store to see if she wants anything else. I couldn't find a basket around the place, so I just told her to keep things in her purse, and then she can buy everything together. She wasn't nicking anything. You got that wrong." Sid the security guard did not look remotely amused, which of course was understandable. "Why didn't you tell me about this, Jenna? You can't do this. We don't do things like this around here in this store. If you didn't have a basket for your customer, you should have told her to wait here and gone and got her one. I could have falsely accused her of stealing. A customer must pay for their items straight away, or other than that carry them around in a basket and pay for everything together. But if she puts unpaid items in her purse, It's easy for me to assume that she's stealing." "Oh, I'm so sorry, ma'am," said Jenna, looking at Sheila with an expression of exaggerated apology on her face. "I should have done things the correct way. Sid is absolutely right about that. This is all my fault. I can get you a basket for your nightie if you prefer, so you can see if there's anything else in the store you might like to purchase. So I can ring them all up for you. All your items, that is. Either that, or you might like to come over to the counter to just buy the nightdress from me right now." "I think, Jenna, in the circumstances, I should probably buy the nightdress right away. After all," she said, casting the security guard a withering look, "I wouldn't want to be falsely accused of being a thief, would I?" "Sorry about that, ma'am," said the security guard, looking very sincere. "This was not your fault, ma'am. It was Jenna's fault entirely. You can't do this again, Jenna. You'll get me and the customers in trouble." "I know, Sid. I'm so sorry. I won't do it again. I don't know what I was thinking," said Jenna. "I guess it's been one of those mornings when everything has got on top of me. And as I say, I just wasn't thinking straight. My head's been all over the place, sorting out the vests over here. They've only gone and put the wrong labels on the items." Sid looked frustrated and almost a little disappointed that he hadn't successfully apprehended a shoplifter. He frowned at Jenna and said, "As I was saying, Jenna, don't do this again. Or it'll not just be me with my head on the chopping board. It'll be you too." "Come with me, ma'am," said Jenna, beckoning for Sheila to follow her to the counter. Sheila's face flushed red with embarrassment as she pulled out the red silken nightdress. It was so humiliating getting caught red-handed like this, and the fact that even the sales assistant had known she had stolen the nightdress was all the more disheartening for her. Was she losing her touch, she wondered? Sheila felt like a chastened dog whose owner had put its nose in its own vomit. It wasn't a good feeling at all. Her previous adrenaline surge had seemingly flatlined. She was feeling like a punched-out yoga ball that had lost all its air. She straightened herself out, trying to compose herself. She ran a self-soothing hand over her red leather jacket, as if patting herself, reassuringly, like you might do to an alarmed cat or dog. If Jenna Fletcher had not come to her defence, things could have gone badly pear-shaped. Sheila Morris was not stupid. She knew only too well that one day her luck might actually run out. Everyone knew that on life's journey there were ups and downs along the way, and what goes up invariably has to come down at some point. Sheila was terrified about how her prim and proper husband Vince would react if he ever knew about any of this. He was disgusted by thieves and criminals of any kind. So if the man had the slightest notion what his wife got up to, in order to amuse herself, to relieve her boredom, and to bring a thrill to her life, he'd likely believe he didn't know the woman he'd married at all. He would not be the kind of man that would ever understand why Sheila would sneakily take something that she could well afford to buy. How would Sheila ever be able to explain to her husband Vince the electrifying exhilaration that suddenly overcame her when she took things that didn't belong to her and clandestinely stuffed them in her purse? Furthermore, she'd been doing this all her life, just to get her kicks. It was like a drug that gave her a euphoric high, but the come-downs were never pleasant. But when there's a high, there's always a low. The sales assistant picked up her nightdress and smiled warmly at Sheila, knowing full well that Sheila had attempted to steal the nightdress. "As I was saying, you've got really good taste, ma'am. I told you the red nightdress would look very good on you, didn't I? I'm glad you decided to buy it today," she said, folding it very gently in layers of tissue paper and putting it into a box. "Your husband is going to love you in this little number. My guess is you won't get any sleep tonight, once he's seen you modelling this for him." "Yes, it is rather lovely," said Sheila. "But just so you know, my husband would hate it if I wore something like this. He's rather straight-laced, you see." "Well, then he's a fool if he doesn't appreciate you wearing this for him," said the sales assistant with a laugh. "My guess is you're going to look absolutely gorgeous in this." "Oh, goodness gracious me, ma'am, look at this," said the sales assistant, reading the label on the nightdress that she was about to remove. "This is an extra, extra large. You took the wrong size for yourself. I guess it's an easy mistake to make, but this nightdress would swim on you. I'll go and get you a small, shall I?" That's very kind of you, dear. Sheila couldn't give a toss what size the red nightdress was. She'd put it away with all the trinkets she stole over the years, so it would gather dust in the playroom closet, where it would never see the light of day again. But then again, the sales assistant didn't need to know that. And then it occurred to Sheila that because of Jenna's great kindness towards her, she should leave the nightdress to her, with the manager, claiming it was a surprise present for her, as Jenna would also have been as small. When Jenna returned to replace the extra-large nightdress for a smaller one, she wrapped it carefully in tissue paper. Sheila said in a muted voice, "Oh, by the way, I meant to thank you for what you did back there, with the security guard. It was very kind of you to come to my defence. I truly appreciate it." Jenna looked up at Sheila Morris and gave her a bright, sunny smile. "No problem, ma'am," she said politely, handing Sheila the package containing the red nightdress. "Ma'am," she said in a low voice, looking carefully around herself to check that no one was in hearing distance. But the security guard, Sid, had long gone, and was probably sulking in a corner like a cat that had allowed the mouse he'd been chasing to get away. "Word of advice, ma'am. Don't do something like this again. It's really not worth it. You really don't want to end up with a criminal conviction. My sister Erica used to shoplift relentlessly. She got a buzz from stealing stuff that she didn't even want, just for the hell of it. I rather suspect you're the same, ma'am, in that regard. You don't look like the kind of person who actually needs to shoplift. Let's just say it was the biggest mistake on my sister's part, getting addicted to shoplifting. Please don't make the mistake she did. My sister's now got a criminal record. She struggles to get employment, even though I absolutely know she'd never ever steal again. She's a highly skilled chartered accountant, you know. She learnt some hard lessons along the way." Jenna looked at Sheila with a piteous look on her face that made Sheila want to inwardly squirm, for she loathed anyone pitying her. "Think about what I said, ma'am," said Jenna kindly. Sheila nodded, her face reddening, the heat rising up in her skin. She didn't know how to respond to Jenna, but now she perfectly understood why Jenna had come to her immediate defence. It was obvious that her sister Erica had suffered from the same stealing addiction that had governed her entire life as it had done Sheila's. Jenna had seen her sister in her, which was why she'd stuck out her neck on her account and come to her immediate rescue. Sheila Morris could not say a single word. Her tongue was tied and was stuck to the roof of her mouth, but she nodded again as she thanked Jenna and soberly marched out of the store with her head held high, after, of course, dropping the nightdress off at the manager. "It's for Jenna. She's a good friend of mine. She works in lingerie. You know the one." "Yes, I do, ma'am." "Well, it's a nightdress. I bought it for her because I know she's very partial to this red nightdress, and she's always been very good to me." "It's very kind of you, ma'am," said the manager. "Jenna will be most thrilled." Sheila Morris left the store abruptly, looking as dignified as she possibly could. It was important to look like you were confident and assertive, even if you felt as if the world had dealt you a hefty blow. When Sheila finally sank into the leather seats of her Land Rover, her whole body collapsed, and her straight back almost crumpled on the seat, as if she'd become like a folding chair. Sheila Morris began to slap her steering wheel furiously, as if it was her steering wheel that had predisposed her to being caught shoplifting, when in reality the fortuitous events in the store had all but been her fault. If she didn't steal, she wouldn't get herself into these pickles. But then again, that was why she stole in the first place, for getting away with something that you shouldn't do was the most deliriously euphoric feeling in the entire world for Sheila. But getting caught was a different story altogether. It was like a cold slap in the face, and a stark reminder to Sheila that she wasn't as consummately accomplished at stealing as she actually thought she was. "You stupid idiot!" she reprimanded herself severely, almost as if she was scolding a little child for misbehaving rather badly. "You stupid idiot! You shouldn't have got bloody caught! You're better than that! What the hell is wrong with you, Sheila Morris?" Indeed, Sheila had hit the steering wheel so hard that her hands ached from the impromptu attack, and the next morning she would find her hand covered in black bruises. Sheila reluctantly started up the engine of her Land Rover, which purred happily like a contented cat, despite the fact that the steering wheel had undergone some rather rough treatment on her account. She drove away from the department store, but she felt as flat as a pancake that had been placed on a piping hot griddle without any raising agent, for on this morning her normal effervescent bubbliness had fizzled away, as if it had never existed at all. She was on her way to pick up her daughter Lily from her friend's house. The Jenkins lived at the enviable, large, prepossessing white Georgian house at the bottom of their street, framed like all the other houses on the right-hand side of their street by a heavily wooded area, comprised of tall, lofty trees, and a plethora of exciting hiking trails, some for the ambitiously inclined. The Jenkins house was the envy of everyone in the street, including Sheila Morris herself, who'd have happily swapped houses in an instant, if given the chance, but that would never ever happen, for the Jenkins loved and were very devoted to their Georgian house, and would never consider selling the place, no matter how generous the offer from a potential buyer. Let's just say if you could shoplift houses and tuck them away in your pockets as easily as a bottle of perfume from the store, Sheila Morris would have done that a long time ago. Sheila Morris envied the Jenkins Georgian house, even though her stunning, rather opulent-looking modern bungalow was extremely sophisticated in every single sense of the word. It boasted the most cutting-edge modern conveniences that would be the envy of many, like swish velvety curtains that at a press of a button would draw themselves, remote-controlled lighting, and a Bang & Olufsen musical centre that operated in every single room in the house at a flick of a switch. By all accounts, the Morrises' bungalow had cost a fortune to build, which they had done with no expense spared. The bungalow possessed a modern, understated elegance, but it sadly lacked the pomp and ceremony of the Jenkins Georgian home, that gave off a stately ambience so typical of the grandiose, regal-looking houses of that time, and made you believe that whoever lived in that imposing, rather courtly house had to be related to royalty. Still, you couldn't have everything, could you? Sheila Morris secretly engaged in personal fantasies of bulldozing her current bungalow and building a replica house exactly the same as the Jenkins Georgian home. But then she reasoned with herself rather wisely that it would never ever be the same. You can certainly make a house appear to look historic by building an exact copy of houses of that time. But it's like buying an imitation handbag, and not the original handbag, which is not the same thing. For a house's history is part of its charm and character, and that you cannot recreate with just bricks and mortar. Since the Jenkins lived incredibly close to the Morrises, Sheila's 11-year-old daughter Lily could easily walk home, but Sheila had texted her daughter to say that she was on her way back from the department store and would pick her up in a few minutes, and so there was no need for her to walk home. The Jenkins and the Morrises had known each other for many years, especially as they lived on the same street. The families had become close friends, and Sheila was particularly close to Amber Jenkins, who was the mother of Lily's best friend Brittany. The family frequently entertained each other at barbecues and dinner parties during the year, and once a week Sheila and Amber Jenkins would meet up in town for their weekly luncheon together, which was always a fun affair, for they would experiment with different cuisines, from Italian to Thai, as both women had a great appreciation for fine food. They would naturally talk about anything and nothing, and were all the more close because both women had girls of a similar age that went to the same prestigious private school and were in the same class together. Amber Jenkins also had a 13-year-old son, who was a couple of years older than his sister, and Amber Jenkins seemed to be spending her life ferrying her son around to all sorts of extracurricular activities, from judo to taekwondo, and yet she enjoyed playing the part of a dotingly dutiful parent, it would seem. Soon Sheila was driving down their familiar, beautiful tree-lined street, where the trees met each other in an arch, like a long line of dignified soldiers linking arms together. It meant that the soft summer sunlight would sneakily peek through the glossy, leafy green foliage and allow ethereal slivers to twinkle through the trees and leave pretty prisms of light, casting their shadows across the road. There were clusters of leaves on both sides of the road that had been left over from the previous fall and looked like a large sweeping pillow of golden confetti. Sheila Morris drove straight down the road, passing her own bungalow on the right-hand side of the street, to get to the Jenkins property at the bottom of the road. She quickly put the radio on to drown out the annoying voice in her head that kept telling her what a klutz she'd been in the department store. If it wasn't for the sweet sales assistant, Jenna, Sheila knew she could potentially be in the police station by now, having her fingerprints taken, and the thought made her shudder with horror. Sheila took a swift right-hand turn and glided down a red brick driveway, and then reached the Jenkins property, but all the while her hands clasped the steering wheel so tightly that her knuckles were showing rather obtrusively. The tension in her shoulders made her whole body feel as stiff and as uncompliant as a shop mannequin. Sheila sighed as she parked her Land Rover outside the Jenkins front door. She began to blow the horn more impertinently than usual, as her patience after the unforeseen, rather humiliating events of the morning had inspired her mood to become somewhat cranky and a little irritated. Very often Mrs. Jenkins would pick up both girls from school and bring them back to her house, so it was common for Brittany and Lily to spend lots of time together. Sheila Morris was still cursing under her breath for her complete stupidity at getting caught. She prided herself on being a shrewdly cunning thief that could steal things with a wily slip of her hand, and over the years she was getting better and better at refining her Machiavellian skills at stealing. But today she'd been seen by the security guard, and possibly even the sales assistant herself, and so Sheila Morris felt like she'd badly failed herself. Sheila Morris looked up from her driver's side seat to see her daughter Lily charging towards her, with her school satchel flung casually over her shoulders. Lily Morris had slight, narrow shoulders and bony, awkward knees that protruded from beneath her blue and white gingham school dress. Her chestnut-brown hair was swept away from her face in a proud but messy ponytail, and was tied up with a blue ribbon, for if your hair was long at the school, it was mandatory that it was tied up in ribbon. Lily's brown eyes, as usual, always looked mischievous, as if she was up to no good. Brittany Jenkins was standing in the arched, very glamorous doorway of her Georgian home, waving her hand at both Sheila and Lily. Sheila Morris waved back at Brittany to be polite, but her daughter Lily wilfully ignored her best friend, which was a tad unusual. Lily was out of breath when she excitedly sank into the passenger side seat next to her mother. Sheila Morris finally honked her horn to bid farewell to Brittany, and then the front door of the Jenkins house closed behind itself. "So how was your day at school, love?" Sheila Morris asked her daughter. "Oh, you know," said Lily, "every day at school is exactly the same. But it was cool spending time with Brittany after school. She's going to New York next week, you know. Well, not next week, the week after next. Lucky fish. I wish I was going to New York. She's even getting a couple of days off from the headmistress. A Thursday and a Friday, would you believe? She's been given special permission. You know what Mrs. Patchett is like. She never gives time off to anyone. But Brittany sashays into her office this morning to see Mrs. Patchett, and she gets time off school, 2 days to be precise. A Thursday and a Friday, as I keep saying. How fair is that? Some people get all the luck. I don't think if I went to see Mrs. Patchett, she'd give me a couple of days off school. But I think she really likes Brittany. But then everybody does, don't they? She only has to smile at the teachers and they give in to her. It's one rule for her and another one for us. It makes me sick to my stomach, it really does." "Brittany is your best friend, love. The way you're talking, you sound incredibly jealous about her going to New York for a couple of days. I'm quite sure Mrs. Patchett gave her those days off for very good reason." "Well, if you must know, it's her grandfather's 80th birthday. He's having it on a Friday night. It's going to be a special event, with fireworks and stuff." "Sounds absolutely lovely. Well, love, I can see why Brittany has been given a couple of days off school if that's the case. It's not every day that your grandfather turns 80, is it?" Lily pulled a contorted face. "You should have seen Brittany, Mum. She was so full of herself, so inflated her ego was. She was showing me the fancy dress she was going to wear to the party. She had it specially made for her by her mother's fashion designer. She was parading it around the house to show off to me. I think she thought she was a beautiful princess. Well, I never told her she looked pretty. I never said a single word." "Sweetheart, I don't like the way you're talking about your best friend with such obvious contempt. It's not pretty," said Sheila Morris, realizing her daughter was displaying the very unattractive symptoms of jealousy. Just because her best friend was going to New York, This was a side of her daughter Sheila Morris had not yet seen, and she didn't like it one single bit. "Anyway, I'm the one that got the last laugh," said Lily, grabbing her satchel and retrieving what looked like some navy velvety blue material from inside her bag. She was wearing a smug, self-satisfied look on her face. "I don't think Brittany is going to look like a princess any more, Mum." Sheila glanced in horror as she realised that her daughter was folding out a beautiful velvety blue dress on her lap. "This is her dress! I took it from her bedroom. Hanging up in the closet it was, when she wasn't looking. So she's not going to be able to wear it to her grandfather's party after all. Serves her right," said Lily, making a face. "She was showing off so much. She deserves everything she gets." "You what?" said Sheila Morris, jerking the steering wheel. "You took your best friend's dress from her closet? That was especially made for her. Why would you do such a thing, love? It will be so obvious to her that you took it. I didn't raise you to become a thief, and the Jenkins aren't stupid, you know. If the dress is gone, they'll connect the dots to you. You couldn't be more obvious, love, if you tried." At this, Lily cocked her face. "That's rich coming from you, Mum, when you've been stealing for years and years. Don't look so surprised. Yes, I know all about it. I know why you send me off to go and get an ice cream at the shops, just so that I'm out of your way. But I'm not stupid, you know. I've seen you clandestinely slipping things into your purse, like that ugly vase you got, and then hide them in the closet in the playroom. You've taken tons of stuff over the years, so don't you dare lecture me about stealing, because you do it all the time. What's good for the goose is good for the gander, as Daddy always says." So there we are. That is the end of part 2. Part 3 is tomorrow night. I look forward to you joining me then. Until next time, goodbye and good night.